What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the Season 1, Episode 1 and 2 review of The Legend of Korra, entitled Welcome to Republic City and A Leaf in the Wind. And but before I get into that, let me just give you a couple quick updates. My sort of exile from YouTube, if you want to call it that, is not over yet. It'll probably last for at least another week, and I'm gearing up to graduate in May, and this April, my final basically month of my senior year of college has been quite hellish for me. So I'll probably be out of commission for at least another week, and I'm just here to bring you just this series premiere review of The Legend of Korra. Alright, so I know this is probably, kind of late by YouTube standards, especially since the episodes were initially leaked and then, they were released on Coronation. So, this premiere review is probably a little late by YouTube standards. Also, this video will probably be longer than usual for a half-hour episode, especially because there's 2 episodes that I have to review in one sitting, and plus the series premiere of, the premiere of a series rather is, very important. And I just want to take my time to sort of really flesh out all of the details of the world building and to flesh out some, other details about what I expect from the series to come. Alright, so first I have to say, oh man, I've been waiting for this. We've all been waiting for this for a very long time. And I must say, this did not disappoint. Not at all. Not in the least did it disappoint me one bit. They continue to have, very, it's sort of straddling that line between, mature and still kind of, kiddie. But the people who, write these episodes do not treat us, at least for somebody like me who's, 23 years old watching this, they don't treat me like an idiot, which is, something I appreciate, especially since, most American cartoons are so, they're, designed for kids. And so I really appreciate the sort of writing that the people who create this series are invested in. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the aesthetics. Then I'm going to talk about, then I'm going to give you a summary of the episode. And then I'm going to give you my analysis of the episode. So this will be broken into episode 1. I'm going to do that for episode 1, and then I'm going to do that for episode 2. And there will be, or maybe I've already have, annotations. Alright, so getting into the episode 1 review. Let's talk about the aesthetics. The animation is, exactly as it was before. I don't see any, real differences. And of course, the animation and the artwork, for this series has always been top notch. So, no complaints there. The animation is still just excellent, still awesome. And of course, again, the choreography and the fights are still great. And it's just the fights, even in the little skirmishes that we see in this first episode, which is, absolutely amazing, really spot on. But one thing that I noticed about this episode is the musical selections and the way in which the selection of the musical scores sort of reflect what's going to be, I think, a central part of the tension throughout this series, which is the relationship or sort of the conflict between, traditional forms of society versus the encroaching modernity that we see in Republic City, which is, really the sort of metropolis of the entire, Avatar world, it seems like. And so what they've done is they still keep their, Asian influence. And so they have, traditional Asian music, but they also have, some selections in here that are, swing jazz. So if any of you are familiar with swing jazz, you know that it was really big in the 1920s, maybe a little bit in the 1930s as well. And that sort of music is really, really sort of, reminiscent of, the early modern period of America, right when, not industrialization, but when modernity really, really started to kick into high gear. So you get things like, cars, radios, the, the formation of, mass media journalism, stuff like that. And so, that musical selection, the sort of, traditional Asian music, juxtaposed with the, swing jazz, really reflects sort of the central tension that's going to be, played out throughout where I expect to be the rest of this season, and probably the rest of the series as well, especially given what happens in episode 2. So this season has been labeled Book 1 Air. And so that probably tells me that this season will revolve around Korra learning to master airbending, who she will be taught, by Tenzin, who's Katara's son. And so when the episode first opens up, we see that, the White Lotus is on a search for the next avatar, who they know, given, how the cycle works out, will be, either in the northern or the southern water tribe, but they don't know which. So when we, see them searching, it looks like they've already been to the northern water tribe, but there's been no luck. And now they're, in the southern water tribe, and they get to this house. And the people there are like, your search is over because we're pretty sure that, that our child is the next avatar. And so then the guy is like, what makes you so sure about this? And then bam, Korra comes right in. She like, she's, a little kid, but she like blows a hole through a wall. And then she's like, I'm the avatar. You got to deal with it. And then you see like this little girl, who's a little bit, still has baby fats, a little chubby. And, you can already tell what her personality is going to be like when she says, you got to deal with it. We are already introduced to somebody who has, a very aggressive and a very, very forceful personality. And from what we can tell, she already has a little bit of, mastery of earth bending, water bending, and also fire bending, but obviously she hasn't completely mastered them, and she can't air bend at all. So they know right there that Korra's going to be the next avatar. Then there's a time skip, and it sort of transitions into this test of Korra's fire bending mastery. And so she's already, at this point, she's already mastered earth bending, and she's, of course, already mastered water bending. And now this is the test for her fire bending mastery. And she's engaged in a duel with several people. And she is a formidable warrior. I mean, you can already tell that she's way more, aggressive, way more forceful than it seems like Aang ever was. And the only time that, Aang really got aggressive was when he was in that avatar state. But other than that, that's not to say that he wasn't a formidable warrior, but it's just that you can clearly see the clash in the styles between Korra and Aang. And like I said before, the choreography is still awesome, but there's also some foreshadowing about, Korra's characterization. At one point during the duel, they remarked that, she's a very strong fighter, but somebody, I forget who it was, but someone said she's strong but lacks restraint. And so that's some, foreshadowing about her, characterization and about her characteristics. And, they also say that she, excels at the physical aspects of bending, but not in terms of the spiritual aspects of bending. And from where I stand, I think this is, her personality is a little bit cliche, but I don't think it's cliche for female characters because, this sort of, character archetype has been done, a lot of times before with the male protagonist, but we haven't really seen. It's not that there aren't any, aggressive female characters or, female leads or female protagonists, but this is a sort of character archetype that we don't generally see with female protagonists. And I think it might work with Korra because it's, not as cliche with female protagonists. But I think it works because, for me personally, I want to see an aggressive girl. I want to see, somebody I want to see a woman whoop some ass, basically. That's what I want to see. Men whooping ass is always fun, but now it's time for, some females to engage in some ass whooping. And, like I said before, there's, also some foreshadowing with her characterization. It seems like she's hot-headed, she's impulsive, she's imprudent. So all of the things that go along with this headstrong personality will seem to, also be applicable to Korra. But also in terms of Korra's characterization, I also want to know why she's like this. It's, of course I want to see her, get in there, be badass, whoop somebody's ass. But I also want an explanation for her characterization. So I want to know why exactly she's like this. And, with Ong, it was easy to see why he had the type of personality he had was because, he was a monk. And, he, shunned violence as a monk. And in fact, I believe he was a vegetarian. I'm almost certain Aang was a vegetarian because of his religious beliefs and about him not wanting to engage in violence. So with Korra, I also would like to see some sort of explanatory foundation of her character as well. Presumably she's been with the White Lotus, so it doesn't seem like there are any, at least during the duration of the time skip that we know about or that happened in this first episode, she's been with the White Lotus. So I don't think there would be any traumatic experiences that she had that would explain, why she's so forceful, why she's so headstrong. So I think that a lot of her characterization is going to delve into, her got tongue-tied there, her psychology, but won't focus too much on her past experiences. And I think that, I'm not, it's a little bit too early to tell, but I think that if they leave this sort of explanatory, foundation of her character out of the narrative, I think that might make her, characterization suffer because, she would have a certain, personality type that's, not explained or, that, we just can't figure out or there's no reason for, rather. And she, beats up all of these people during, the firebending test, and she passed. And so, like I said, she's now, mastered the 3 elements, and the only thing left for her is airbending, which it looks like she's going to have a lot of trouble with. So in comes Tenzin. And before I get, even into Tenzin and, his relationship to Korra, his kids are just awesome, man, especially Iki. Iki is just so funny, just, really, really hyperactive. Seems like she has, some sort of ADHD. Her mouth is running like, 100 miles per hour. And, she's just really funny. And, of course, the comic relief aspects of, Avatar, are still in there. And so, Tenzin has been introduced now. Like I said before, he's the son of Katara and Aang, and he's supposed to teach Korra, airbending. And, well, actually, no, that's not true. I've written something in my notes, and then it turned out not to be true. All right, so it turns out that Tenzin actually can't teach, Korra airbending. He has to return to Republic City because there's, a lot of political unrest with the equalists, who it looks like will be the major antagonists of this series. And I'm not sure if they're villains yet, if we can call them villains, but they certainly, there's some foreshadowing that they are going to be the antagonists. And so Tenzin wants to return to Republic City to sort of stabilize the political situation there first, before he teaches Korra airbending. And this also gives us a little bit of insight into the political structure of, the Avatar world since, we last saw it with the last airbender. So basically what's happened is, in addition to the Water Nation, the Fire Nation, the Earth Nation, and the Air Nation, there's now a 5th nation called the United Republic of Nations. And the United Republic of Nations is a political body. It's, a nation, but it's also a political body that's comprised of the United Council of Nations, and it's the governing body of the United Republic of Nations, and it has a representative from the Earth Nation, the Fire Nation, the Air Nation, and that representative is Tenzin, which is why he wants to go back to Republic City and sort of stabilize the political unrest there. And also there's one representative each from both the Northern Water Tribe and the Southern Water Tribe. And so, when I saw this, I was thinking that Tenzin's priorities are really misplaced. I can understand him, wanting to go back, to Republic City and sort of, not have to worry about, teaching Korra, airbending. But Korra is she's the avatar. She has, the spiritual and political obligation to maintain, balance within the avatar world. And by not training her, he's potentially, creating a major imbalance within the world. And I think, it should be, Korra's task to deal with, things if they get out of hand, since she's, both, a sort of major political and spiritual leader of the Avatar world. And so Tenzin kind of leaves her behind, and he goes to, Republic City to deal with the political unrest there. But Korra, being the headstrong, rebellious person that she is, she goes, to Republic City, and she, attempts to, track down Tenzin to sort of convince him that, he should, teach her to airbend. So the rest of the episode is just comprised of her various misadventures in Republic City, which involve her, trying to find something to eat, her confrontation with an equalist, although that's not a fight, but she gets into like a verbal sparring match, and also her mishaps with the metal bending squad, which is a awesome new addition to the Avatar, world, or, mythos. And after she goes through, all of these misadventures, she finally is able to, track down Tenzin, after she gets arrested. But, Tenzin comes to her rescue, and then he finally decides that, his obligation is actually to train Korra, and that, he has to do that in conjunction with, being, the Air Nation representative. So now let me just give you my, analysis of this episode. Like I said before, it looks like one of the major conflicts of this series will be between traditional forms of society and encroaching modernity. And this is, really shown in, like I said before, the musical selections, but it's also shown when, Korra wants to go get something to eat. And she has no money, and the shopkeeper, tells her, then what use are you to me? And I'm thinking to myself, she's the freaking avatar here. And, it's really a culture shock. It looks like, for Korra, because, she probably comes from, a rural setting where it's, probably a gift economy. She can go and get something to eat if she, needs to get something to eat. But in the metropolis and, what looks like a commercial society, if not a capitalist society, the economic transactions are different there. And so she has to sort of, adjust culturally to this new world. And there's also this, interesting scene where she's, on Naga, her spirit beast, I think it's called, and she's riding Naga down the middle of the street. And you're just saying to yourself, doesn't she know that the street is for cars? Like, she can't ride down the middle of the street. But, again, where she comes from, they probably don't even have streets. So it looks like, Republic City is, the most advanced, city in the Avatar world. It's a, a huge metropolis. And, but the development, it seems like, the Republic City is a very, very advanced city, but the development hasn't gotten to every place in the Avatar world. And so that probably, accounts for, Korra's cultural shock when she gets to, Republic City. And, that always happens when in any society where there's, rapid, social or economic development, there will always be a huge, huge tension between, traditional forms of society and, more, advanced forms of society, if you want to call it that. And so there'll probably be very, very interesting questions about the sort of role that the Avatar will play in this new world, because in Aang's world there wasn't any metropolis like Republic City, and so it'll be interesting to see how the Avatar will function in a new urban setting, which is something we really didn't get to see in that first series. Also, we got introduced to the equalists. And the equalists are a political faction within Republic City which thinks that benders are, tyrannical. And so at first sight, it seems like it's an egalitarian movement. In other words, it seems like they want equality between benders and non-benders. But the last sort of shot at the end of the first episode shows us that it's probably going to be more like a guerrilla slash terrorist group. And so it looks like there'd be a possibility of some sort of civil war. So not just civil unrest, but it might be a civil war if the equalists actually can form not just, you know, a guerrilla slash terrorist group, but actually form into a political movement. So it seems like Korra might have her work cut out for her in a very significant way. And also we see that this is a complicated political situation, because in the first episode we clearly see that to a certain extent the equalists are right. There are some benders who believe that they're superior to other people, and there are benders who are actually involved in various organized crimes. So there's like, the triple threat triads, which is like, some sort of mafia group that employs benders. And so we actually see that the, equalists might not just be, it might not just be a black and white type of thing where the equalists are clearly bad and the benders are clearly good. There might actually be some sort of, complicated, ethical situation going on here. And also, the metal benders are freaking cool, man. The metal benders are just freaking cool. But first, let me just talk about, Korra for a second. And sort of, explain, the context for the metal benders being introduced. I know I said that Korra is a formidable warrior, but let me just add that she is a fucking brutal warrior. Brutal. So, like I said before, there's some benders who are involved in organized crime, and there's a scene where they're extorting a shopkeeper. And, Korra, jumps in, obviously, to protect the shopkeepers, and she gets into a fight with these benders. One's a earth bender, one's a fire bender, one's a water bender. And, so she gets into this confrontation with them. And a water bender, bends water and, shoots it at her, but she kind of, sends it back at him and turns it into ice. And it sort of, freezes, around it. The water freezes around his head. And then she roundhouse kicks this dude, and he slams his head on the fender of a car. And I was like, holy shit, that is not like anything I've ever seen Aang do. Because Aang, he tried to shun violence whenever he could, but Korra, nope. Roundhouse kick to the face and slammed his head on the car fender. And I'm just like, damn. And in the midst of this fight, of course, she's destroying a lot of property. What would a headstrong character be if they didn't destroy some public property, right? So then, a police force of metal benders see what's going on, and they sort of, jump in. And, there's this, really cool chase scene where they finally capture her, and they take her back to, metal bending headquarters, I guess. And we get to, see how, Toph actually, used her metal bending to start a metal bending police force. And that's just another addition that we see to the mythos of the Avatar world. Also, in closing, Katara, of course, by now everyone knows that Katara is alive, and it seems like she's the only one from her generation who's still alive. There's an allusion to Toph's death. There's an allusion to Sokka's death, and of course, Aang is dead. So of that original group, she's like the only one who's left, and she's 85 years old, so she might not even live to the completion of this series. But there was one brief allusion to Zuko's mom, where Katara begins to tell the story, but is kind of cut off in the middle of it. So apparently she knows the full story, and this might be some sort of foreshadowing. I don't know. There might be a resolution to that subplot, or the writers might just keep us dangling. Alright, so now on to the review of the second episode of the premiere, which is A Leaf in the Wind. And this review will probably go a lot faster. It's definitely going to be easier to review because the plot is not as complicated. And of course, again, in this episode, we also see that the world building is really phenomenal again. And there's two aspects of the world building in particular. One is the tool that Tenzin uses to train Korra, and the other is the introduction of pro bending as a sport. So again, this episode, like I said before, revolves around the conflict between, tradition versus modernity. And this conflict is sort of foreshadowed at the beginning of this episode when Korra wants to go to the arena to watch a pro bending match. And pro bending is a new addition to the Avatar world. It's a sport, and it's not. I don't think there's anything in the real world that's really like pro bending. Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head anyway. But pro bending is a sport, which obviously involves bending. But it uses modern styles of bending, and I would really like the writers to expand on the sort of differences between traditional styles of bending and modern styles of bending, because we know that there's styles of bending insofar as there's like earth bending requires very stiff movements, very, punches, kicks, things like that, while airbending, for example, is, more smooth or more fluid. So we know that there are different styles of bending as far as that goes, but not in terms of the actual techniques of bending. I don't think that was really touched on a lot in the first series, and it would be interesting for the writers to expand on that. But like I said, Korra wants to, go to the arena to watch a pro bending match. But Tenzin's like, nah, I'm not having none of that. He thinks that pro bending is a sort of perversion of traditional bending, and he thinks that if Korra gets involved in this pro bending, that it would be an impediment to her training. So Korra finally begins her airbending training. And it's again beautiful world building that they've done here. There's a tool that Tenzin uses to train, that he used to train his children in airbending, and that he's now going to use to train Korra in airbending. It is basically like this circular platform that has a bunch of boards that are standing up, and they're like I don't know how to describe it, but they're like doors. Basically, they're shaped like, doors. And they're on these mechanisms that allow them to spin around. And you use air bending to, to send like, a gust of wind through them, and all of the boards start spinning. And then you have to, find your way, through this sort of circular platform without touching any of the spinning boards. And so this is what, Korra has to do to learn the sort of spiral and circular movements of airbending. And it really doesn't go well for her. She hits every single board. I mean, she really gets smacked around. And as the episode goes on, we see that she's continuing to fail at airbending, and she's getting more and more frustrated. And besides that, she also wants to go to a pro bending match to learn more modern styles of bending, but Tenzin won't let her do that. And again, what would a headstrong character be if they didn't rebel against their teachers? So she sneaks out of the compound, and the Order of the White Lotus, which has been tasked with watching her, is supposed to be keeping an eye on her and basically keeping her on a sort of lockdown. But she's the Avatar, so she easily sneaks out, and she goes to the arena to watch a pro bending match, and she meets Mako and Bolin, who are members of the Fire Ferrets pro bending team. And Bolin, teaches her some, new earth bending techniques. And as the episode goes on, pro bending involves, 3-member teams. And a member of the Fire Ferrets, dropped out or was a no-show. And so she kind of got recruited into the Fire Ferrets. And so, a lot of this episode deals with her, pro bending, I guess, being a pro bender. So she starts off pretty badly as a pro bender, which is kind of surprising because, and it's like I said before, it's really going to be interesting to see if they continue to develop this idea of different styles and techniques of bending, because it's interesting to see that somebody who's a master, who's, you know, the avatar, supposedly the master of all of the elements, and when she gets into this pro bending match, she you know, really struggles with, trying to find out, you know, the proper techniques and style to use during this pro bending match. And then, you know, as the episode goes on, she's, you know, getting beat up really bad. And then, you know, it goes from bad to worse because, you know, Tenzin's found out that she's, you know, sneaked out, and he's, you know, tracked her to the arena, and they get into, you know, a sort of, you know, verbal altercation or whatever. And then, you know, pro bending happens on like this huge platform, and it's surrounded by like water. And if you get knocked off the platform, then, you know, a point goes to, you know, the opposing team. And it gets to a point where she's about to get knocked off the platform, but then all of a sudden she starts, you know, using the techniques that Tenzin taught her during her airbender training. And so it looks like, you know, she's now, you know, synthesizing or combining, you know, traditional styles of bending with more modern styles of bending. And of course, you know, the avatar is all about, you know, balance and synthesis. So it looks like she's, you know, starting to come along with her airbender training, and, you know, with her, you know, training with respect to bending more generally. And so one thing that should have been obvious to me, but that I really didn't pick up on until the second episode that I watched, was that, you know, being the avatar, you know, is of course about, you know, physical balance. They have to master all of the elements, but it's also about, you know, and it's also about, you know, obviously spiritual balance. You know, they're the sort of spiritual mediums of the avatar world. But it's also about, you know, a balance of personality, and how, you know, how the experience of learning to bend each element should sort of impact and round out your personality and give balance to your personality. And we saw this when Aang had to learn, you know, earth bending, and he really couldn't get the movements right because, you know, aggression wasn't, you know, really a part of his personality. So he actually had to learn to be, you know, more aggressive, not be violent, but definitely to be more assertive and to be more aggressive. And it seems like this is, you know, a process that Korra is also going to have to go through with respect to, you know, making her personality more balanced. And there's also an allusion to the fact that, you know, Mako and Bolin will probably become recurring characters throughout this season. And it's not really clear what their, you know, function will be within the narrative, but they'll definitely be recurring characters. And I don't know if it's just me, but for some reason, I got the feeling that Mako was a little bit suspicious. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But, you know, we'll see within the next couple of episodes whether, you know, my suspicions pan out and turn into anything. But, you know, like I said before, it seems like a major component of this series will be the sort of conflict between, you know, tradition and modernity. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.